Welcome to Thursday's edition of COVID-19. Amid ongoing concerns over the pandemic, regional leaders here in this corner of the world are partaking in virtual talks to reaffirm their commitment to regional economic stability and public safety. Now, we have details on that later on in the program. Here first is our Kwon So-ah with the latest numbers on the pandemic. So the daily tally here in Korea has been hovering above 100 for the fifth straight day. Should we be worried?
Well, it is a difficult situation. I mean, we're not seeing an exponential surge in cases, but also no clear sign of a decline, which is why authorities are still on high alert. But we do see a slight decline compared to yesterday with 143 infections. But as Sunny said, we still see triple digits, and that for the fifth consecutive day. As you can see here, only on November 7th on this graph, we had double digits. And that is because we have also a rise in daily transmissions of community cases. In fact, that number, the average in the past week, has surpassed 100. So if you go over to our next graph, we see that we have a rise here from 113 to 128. So 15 more domestic infections. And 128 is in fact the highest figure in 20 days. But we are seeing a decline here in cases that were brought in from abroad, that is, so imported cases. And with that, the country has a total of 27,942 infections, and the death toll remains unchanged at 487. Now, there's been quite an increase in cases here in the capital, Seoul, this Thursday. We have 53 infections. The day before, the number was in the 40s, and before that in the 30s. And that is attributed to new cluster infections also related to the military, which our Kim Ji-yeon will go into the details in a bit, but also cases related to a subway station as well as a nursing home.
I see. So back on the international front then, the US broke yet another record high in daily cases, I hear.
Yes, Sunny, the numbers in the US are really calling for more efforts on the containment there in the country. 136,000 cases were reported in just a day, according to data by Johns Hopkins University. And also the Washington Post reported 145,000 new infections. Around 1 million infections were confirmed in the past 10 days, and Texas has become the first state to surpass 1 million cases. So let's take a closer look here at the U.S. first of all. As of noon Korea time, there should be another record high as we're seeing almost 150,000 new infections reported in just 24 hours. Also, Brazil, which has recently seen some declines, is seeing a resurgence with over 47,000 new infections, some 35,000 in France, 32,000 in Italy, and 25,000 new infections in Poland. Let's take a look at the countries with the highest numbers around the world. Again, 5 European countries here in the top 10 now are in the top 10, and Italy has surpassed the 1 million mark, and also a very concerning number in the UK, which has now over 50,000 fatalities. It's the first European country to hit that grim milestone. And with that, the number around the globe is now above 52.4 million, with over 600,000 new infections between noon Korea time yesterday and today. And those are the updates I have for now, but I'll be back with more after the government briefing. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, so thank you for now. Here in Korea, more COVID-19 cases are being reported in the military, breeding concerns about the country's defense readiness posture, especially as new infections are also being reported among U.S. service members stationed in the country. For more on this, I have our Kim Ji-yeon, our defense correspondent, that is, here in the studio with me. Good to see you again, Ji-yeon.
Hello.
Ji-yeon, do start off with the latest outbreak in the Korean military then.
Sure. Seoul's defense ministry reported a total of 11 new COVID-19 cases in the military over the past 2 days. And the majority of new infections, which include both active duty soldiers and civilian employees, occurred at a military compound in central Seoul, handling welfare services for military personnel. 10 of those cases were all confirmed on Wednesday after one of its workers first tested positive on Tuesday. Since then, massive testings of service members in the compound and their family members have been conducted, numbering around 300 people. The Seoul Metropolitan Government said 3 more people have tested positive of the coronavirus this morning after being in contact with someone in the military. Take a listen.
대부분 다 예방적 차원에서 이루어진
The PCR testings have been conducted as a precautionary measure. Concerning the recent cluster infection at a ministerial agency, we've completed disinfecting the facilities where the confirmed patients had been present.
Since the start of the outbreak, the military has seen a total of 178 cases, of which 158 have recovered and 20 are still in treatment. More than 100 service members are in isolation in accordance to the health authorities' guidelines, and more than 1,300 others have also been put in quarantine as part of the military's tougher guidance.
I see. Chen, it must have been quite a scare for the Defense Ministry, especially given the close proximity of these cases to crucial military facilities, I hear.
Right. The ministry's welfare agency where the latest cluster was reported is in a separate compound a few blocks away from the Defense Ministry headquarters. And it's also some distance away from the office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where a mass infection there could have a direct impact on national defense. Although there are no new infections due to the recent case, even after a thorough testing of some 200 people in the building, the ministry has taken extra precaution since some of the confirmed service members could have easily crossed paths with others at the area, with infection rates still unclear at this point. Earlier this week, the ministry has temporarily shut down the welfare agency to conduct disinfection work and has set up a drive-through test center at the ministry compound in front of the Joint Chiefs of Staff building.
Right. Now, Chen, I hear, as I mentioned earlier, there have also been infections among American service members stationed here in Korea.
That's right. In a statement released Tuesday, it confirmed 21 USFK-affiliated individuals have tested positive for the coronavirus after arriving in Korea between October 23rd and November 8th. 16 service members arrived at Osan Air Base on U.S. government charter flights earlier this month, and the rest have arrived on international commercial flights at the Incheon International Airport. The USFK said all of the incoming service members and affiliated individuals were tested upon arrival and have been placed under 14-day quarantine. They must test negative twice in a 24-hour span before they can be released from quarantine.
And Chen, there is no need to worry about possible cluster infections arising from these cases?
Well, the USFK said the patients have not been in contact with anybody else besides those on the flight and anybody providing administrative or medical support after their arrival. And all of those that have tested positive for the virus have been transferred to an isolation facility. And since the outbreak, the USFK have reported 319 cases so far, in which 292, a majority of them have been tested upon arrival and were not cases of local transmission. Despite the recent surge in the new infections, the USFK says it has remained at a high level of readiness, with less than 1% of its active duty service members currently confirmed positive with COVID-19, and that it continues to maintain a robust combined defense posture to protect South Korea against any threat or adversary while maintaining prudent preventative measures.
All right, Chen, that's good to know. Thank you for that coverage.
Thank you for having me.
Right, well, it's time now for the regular briefing on COVID-19 here in Korea for this Thursday, with yet another day of infection numbers, that is, standing above 100. Authorities here have voiced the possibility of a hike in the level of social distancing to 1.5, as is the case in Asan and Cheonan in South Chungcheon province and a few other regions outside of the metropolitan region. Now, to avoid such a rise, health experts are urging against complacency and strict adherence to personal safety measures, including the wearing of face masks, the washing of hands, and the watching of social distance. There is also heightened calls for regular ventilation of indoor places and proper disinfection of surfaces touched by many people. Let's take a look at the revised 5-tier social distancing guidelines as we wait for the briefing to commence. Up on the screen, we share with you first a brief definition of each level. Level 1 refers to sporadic infections that are within medical capacity. Level 1.5 refers to community infections that burden medical capacity within a specific region for more than a week. Level 2 refers to serious outbreaks within a community that look to spread nationwide, while Level 2.5 refers to a nationwide outbreak that threatens healthcare systems across the nation for a week or more. Level 3 refers to a serious nationwide outbreak that is poised to crash the nation's healthcare infrastructure. With regard to the actual numbers of daily cases, the ceiling that determines the level of social distancing seems to have been raised, but officials have claimed the new guidelines aim to ensure an effective and an endurable, if I may, fight against the virus. Right, we have just been told that the briefing may start, and once it does, we'll be back with a summary of that with our Kwon-soa.
First of all, we have Mr. Kwon Junuk with the explanation on the briefing. Let us now begin our regular briefing on the COVID-19 situation here in South Korea for November 12th. As of today midnight, we have 128 new local infections, and therefore the total caseload now stands at 27,942. And we have 138 more people making full recovery, while 2,051 people still remain in quarantine. And we have 53 patients with severe or critical conditions, and we had 0 additional fatality. And let us now look at the major updates on the domestic infections by region as of today noon. First, starting in Seoul City, in relation to the Defense Ministry Welfare Agency in the Yongsan-gu district, we also have additional cases of 14 people being confirmed to date. And in Gyeonggi-do province in Gumpo, in relation to a medical facility there and also a care facility in Anyang City, we have 10 additional cases, raising the total to 143. And next, in the non-metropolitan area in Gyeongsangnam-do province, Hacheon City, in relation to a married couple there, we also have 2 additional cases being confirmed, raising the total to 16 so far. And next, moving to Daejeon City, in relation to the Cheolgu district Jesus Central Church, we also have additional testings of 3 people testing positive for the COVID-19, and we have a total of 40 people being positive so far. And also for the past 2 weeks, starting from the 30th of October and 12th of November, we have seen some analysis of the outbreak trends. And the domestic cases, we have about 35.5% in Seoul City, followed by Gyeonggi-do province as well. And also, aside from the Seoul metropolitan area, we also had major outbreaks at Chungnam, Cheonan, Asan region, as well as Wonju City in Gangwon-do province as well. And as for the sources of cluster infection, we also have found that most of them were cluster infections community-related, and also about 30% were related to the contact with previous contacts, and also we have about 10.5% relating and stemming from the nursing hospitals and nursing homes. And we are seeing cluster infections on the rise as well. And by age group, we have seen that among the confirmed patients, we have seen the percentage of the 20s and 30s. It has also changed from 22% to about 33%. And we have seen a slight rise in this percentage point. And next, in relation to the development of the therapeutics, we have some developments that we would like to share with you. First of all, as for the plasma treatment and antibody treatment, that is, we also would like to say that we are nearing the end of the clinical trials, and we have seen the efficacies to a certain extent, and we have carried out 2 and 3rd phases of the clinical trials, and we are currently carrying out the application process, and we are currently having an open call for about 300 participants, and so far 75 people have signed up. And we are also carrying out the blood plasma treatment clinical trial, and also we have registered 11 applicants out of a total of 60 so far. And as for the clinical trial, one of the challenge is having an open call and having a registration of these volunteers who will be taking part in these clinical trials. So it is therefore needed that we ask for a proactive participation by the doctors as well as the confirmed patients. And the quarantine authorities continue to note that as we are preparing for full winter season, we are also seeing increase of indoor activities, and we also have higher risks of infection at high-risk facilities, including long-term care centers and the nursing hospitals for the elderly. And in particular, as for the multi-use facilities that are frequented by people, and as for the nursing hospitals that house senior patients who are in the high-risk group, it is very important that we comply with quarantine measures there. And indoors, we need to always highlight the importance of wearing face masks and washing of your hands as well. And this is very critical. And we also have a few messages for the public. Recently, we have seen that the efficacy and the news on the efficacy of a certain vaccine developed by a certain company, and we have high expectations among the public for these vaccines. And as quarantine authorities have noted, we say that this is indeed an encouraging news. However, this announcement is in its middle of the phase, and until we have a final result of the efficacy, it will take some time. And until then, we will have also other midterm results being announced by other companies who are developing vaccines as well. And at this certain point of time, the quarantine authorities here in South Korea would like to note the following. If there is a chance for us to forfeit the prepayment, we will also make sure that we secure a large amount of the vaccines. And by year end, our target is to aim for about securing 60% of the population, the vaccines for the population. And also, we will also make sure that even if we forfeit the prepayment for other companies, we will be making sure that we have enough vaccines secured for our public. Please make sure that vaccine procurement is a project for the national health and safety, and we need to also highlight the importance of safety as well as efficacy as well. These will be of utmost importance, and we also need to take into consideration the mass production possibility, retail as well as transportation. All of these will have to be factored in comprehensively, and they will have to be in consideration. And we will make sure that they are carried out in that way and that order as well. And also, we are considering the following. The COVID-19 outbreak here in South Korea compared to other countries in Europe or North America, we are having a confinement or the containment of the COVID-19 virus to a large extent. And aside from the securing of the amount of the vaccine, we will make sure that we will also monitor the vaccinations that will be inoculated in other countries as well, and we will prepare for our vaccination policy and program here in South Korea as well. Currently, the South Korean government is taking multifaceted efforts in order to secure vaccines for COVID-19. However, we ask for your understanding and consideration. At this point in time, the agendas items that are being discussed with certain companies, we cannot reveal them to the public in detail as for the detail and conditions and terms of the negotiation. So once again, we ask for your consideration and understanding, and we will also exert our full efforts to secure enough amount and sufficient amount of vaccine for our public. If we continue with the prolonged outbreak, and if we make sure that we can reduce the number of cluster infections here domestically, we believe that this could also be very effective in having our fight against COVID-19 as well. Thank you very much.
기자님들 질문에 답변 드리겠습니다. 현장 질문은 현재 없으셔서.
Right, that was Deputy Director General Kwon Junuk with Thursday's afternoon briefing. So, what did he have to say?
Let's start with a few updates on the increases of cases related to cluster infections. A total of 14 cases are linked to a Defense Ministry agency, which Kim Ji-yeon earlier reported on. And there has also been rising cases related to nursing home, nursing facility in Anyang in Gyeonggi-do province. And Kwon especially talked about the expectations of vaccine development abroad, as there has been a lot of expectations rising in recent days due to a specific company having had good results in the first results of a third trial. So he says that the South Korean government sees this as good news, but until final results, it still needs some time. And also, he predicted that in the coming weeks or months, there will be other companies also coming out with the first analyses of the third trial. So having good anticipations is good, but still we have to be cautious, as he stressed that efficacy and safety is what we have to focus on. But he mentioned that the government is trying to prepare for around 60% of the population to be supplied with such vaccines.
Right, well, that is good to know. All right, so thank you for that. I'll see you again tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Right, also in related news, movie theatres are devising resourceful ways to stay afloat amid the unprecedented challenges brought on by the pandemic. We have details in this next report.
This is a large multiplex cinema in the eastern part of Seoul. A special event is being held here for Korean baseball fans.
두산 팬인데 두산 플레이오프 1차전 경기를 보러 왔어요.
아무래도 집에서 보는 것보다는 브라운관도 크고 같은 두산을 좋아하는 같은 팬들끼리 모여서 볼 수 있다는 그런 이점이 있어서 왔어요.
조금 색다르기도 하고 직접 현장에 가고 싶었는데 조금 거리도 멀고 해서 그리고 좀 더 큰 스크린으로 볼 수 있는 게 되게 좋은 추억이 될 것 같아가지고 오게 됐어요.
The 2020 postseason is now underway in the KBO, and the games are being shown live at 10 cinemas nationwide. The games kick off at 6:30 p.m. except on Sundays, which is usually the busiest hour for many cinemas. Regardless, cinema operators are relying on KBO games to shore up their massive revenue losses from COVID-19.
Due to current pandemic situation, movies are postponing the premiere and people are losing interest in general. It's an unfortunate situation, but we are trying our best to provide a variety of contents to satisfy our customers and broaden their experience in theaters. KBO broadcast is one of our attempts to do so.
The box office is going through a crisis like no other amid COVID-19. Cinema operators here in Korea have been forced to get creative to pull themselves out of dire straits. They even held on-screen art exhibitions and showed live-streamed opera performances. Cinemas are also offering private screen rentals at a very low cost for people looking to organize parties and other events. Despite these valiant efforts, cinemas have found themselves absorbing huge losses and on the brink of insolvency due to COVID-19. Ticket sales have fallen by more than 1/3, while revenues plummeted 70% compared to the same period last year.
현재 영화 산업의 전반적인 공정에 차질이 생겨 영화 산업이 정상화되는 데는 2년 이상이 걸릴 거라는 관측이 나오고 있습니다. 물론 코로나19 백신의 공급과 영화 산업 내 전반적인 프로세스가 빠른 속도로 회복될 경우에는 좀 더 앞당겨질 수 있을 거라는 희망을 가지고 있습니다만 당장이라고 장담하기는 힘든 상황입니다.
The situation is also grim in box offices abroad. Some of the world's largest cinema chains have been forced to shut their doors and are now facing bankruptcy. Struggling U.S. cinema chain AMC, in a desperate bid to turn its fortunes around, began offering private theater rentals for as low as $99. Here in Korea, the easing of social distancing guidelines means that cinemas are no longer required to keep one empty seat between moviegoers. The government has also handed out discount vouchers that can be used to purchase movie tickets to help boost box office revenues. But given the wide-ranging and permanent repercussions of COVID-19 on the film industry, pundits are prescribing a more fundamental solution.
결국 집에 홈시어터나 아니면 스마트폰이 갖지 못한 매력을 영화관에 주는 것이죠. 그래서 일단 영화관의 기술적인 부분들의 발전을 보여주는 것이 좀 필요합니다. 영화관이 식당이나 사우나보다는 훨씬 안전한 공간이라는 것을 누차 강조할 필요가 있을 것 같고요. 또 영화관에서 확진자가 집단 감염으로 발전된 사례가 없다라는 점도 좀 강조해서 영화관이 안전한 공간이라는 인식이 관객들에게 전달되는 것이 필요할 것 같습니다.
Despite the immense challenges that lie ahead, cinemas are hoping that a sentimental attachment to the movie-going experience will lure audiences back to the silver screen once more.
Elsewhere in the world, hundreds of thousands of people have been affected by the latest trail of violent typhoons in the Philippines amid the struggles faced in light of COVID-19. For more, I have Nicamil Sanchez, a social worker there, live on the line. Hello again, Nicamil.
Hi, Sunny.
Right, Nicamil, I understand Typhoon Vamco has been battering northeastern Philippine provinces as of yesterday. And this onslaught follows last week's destruction brought on by Typhoon Goni. Please do start by telling us about the situation there.
Yes, firstly is we're experiencing a double whammy. Given the pandemic and Typhoon Bamco is currently doing some destruction here in the National Capital Region as well as the Bicol region. So basically it significantly affects the public and private infrastructures. And we will see the significant increase of evacuees. As of the moment in Bicol region, we have more than 170,000 individuals who have evacuated. And you'll see that most of the main airport and port are still closed. So that hampers distribution of relief goods. And the communications facilities are still not working in those areas. So basically, lastly, we are worried about the psychological impact of the prolonged exposure of people in this disaster.
I see. Nicamil, houses have been destroyed and people have been displaced and forced into shelters, all adding tremendous burden on the existing hardships in light of the pandemic there in the Philippines. How are authorities dealing with these unprecedented challenges?
Firstly is they have prepositioned some relief goods in those areas. Secondly is they have organized the armed forces, especially in the rescue operations, given the destruction of Typhoon Bamco. And thirdly is they have ensured that the needed funds are there for the local governments to utilize in terms of providing the needed relief assistance.
And speaking of assistance, Nicamil, the United Nations is urging for humanitarian aid from the international community, and the Korean government, as well as BTS fans over in the US, have already extended some assistance, I hear.
Yes, we are all Asians, and as you will see, historically, the Philippines and the South Korea are bond is forged by blood, and the Philippines is the first country who have assisted South Korea during the war, and you are also the first country who assisted us during the Typhoon Haiyan. So basically, the amount will go a long way, and basically, BTS Jimin, it speaks highly on his character and values as an icon in Korea and even in the Philippines, given his large numbers of followers among the Filipino youth.
Nicamil, with regard to COVID-19, officials there are calling for greater public effort to contain the pandemic ahead of the Christmas celebrations next month, right?
Correct. As you all know, the Filipinos do celebrate. We have the longest celebration of Christmas in the Philippines. So basically, there are public health precautions in terms of Christmas celebration. And there are public health campaigns to minimize those celebrations and large gathering of people. So,
Nicamil, how severe is the COVID-19 situation in the Philippines in recent days?
Currently, we have more than 400 cases. And last November 11, it's around 1,600. The challenge here are those in affected areas of this typhoon because it significantly affects the testing and the tracing and the isolation of those confirmed COVID cases. And basically, the depleting government resources is a major concern.
I see. Well, our prayers to all those victims there. All right, Nicamil, as always, thank you very much for your time and thoughts.
Welcome, Sunny.
The ASEAN +3 Summit kicks off today until this Sunday for a series of virtual meetings on regional collaboration to chart a productive path past the pandemic. Now, to explore such efforts and to discuss the economic conditions here in Korea, I have Professor Song Soo-young from Chungang University. Welcome back, Professor Song.
Thank you for your invitation, Sunny.
And I also have Professor Yang Hee-dong from Ewha Women's University. Pleasure to have you back, Professor Yang.
All right, good to see you again.
Professor Song, President Moon Jae-in has a very busy diplomatic agenda starting today as he engages in talks with his regional counterparts on matters ranging from the economy to health. Please, speak about the economy. Please do tell us a little bit about the importance of charting a multilateral approach to shoring up the economy that has been battered by the pandemic.
Yeah, actually, even before the pandemic's outbreak, actually the regional comprehensive economic partnership, that is a regional cooperation in order to work as a safety net for the regional economy, that has been started in the wake of the 2008 economic crisis. So originally, it has started a discussion of 2011, but even before that, the regional ASEAN countries, 10 countries plus East Asia, China, Japan, and Korea, had started some kind of the regional financial safety net, whose name is called the Chiang Mai Initiative, CMI. So that is some starting point in order to stabilize the regional economy in the wake of the globalization and combined some economic recess. So to that regard, we can say the coronavirus or pandemic is just a trigger, not the cause of the establishment of this regional economic safety net.
I see. Professor Yang, President Moon has sought stronger strategic ties with ASEAN member states from the start of from his term in office at the start, that is back in 2017, under the so-called New Southern policy, in which it pledged to focus on people, peace and prosperity, I believe. Why do you suppose is such an alliance even more important during this pandemic?
Well, already the Asian countries have emerged very important export partners for our economy. For example, if you take a look at the top 10 list of our export partners, you will see that there are 8 Asian countries listed, in that order. And out of those 8 Asian countries, 4 countries are located in ASEAN, such as Singapore, Malaysia, and Vietnam, etc. And you expand our perspective to the top 20, and you will see that there are 8 Asian countries listed in that order. So all these numbers significantly imply that the Asian countries are one of very important partners for our economy. And if you broaden your perspective to the region, and the Asian region is, I think, the second largest export region, only after China. In terms of the investment, the Asian region is third largest, our investment partners after US and China. So we cannot disregard the importance of this area. And besides, as for the COVID-19, I think as already the China government has admitted, this area has been a very superb job in controlling with the very strict posture against the spreading of this virus. So there are many reasons why we cannot slow down our pace with enhancing the cooperation with this area.
I see. Professor Song, there also appears to be much media attention on the potential or scheduled signing of a very ambitious trade pact this coming Sunday among the ASEAN member states, as well as Korea, China, Japan, New Zealand and Australia. Could you tell us more about this trade pact known as the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership?
Yeah, actually, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership has entailed almost 46% of the world population as of 2012, and then 24% of the world GDP as of 2012. So since then, because as of 2020, it might be there is the percentage share of this region is increased a little bit because of the stuttering economy in EU and the United States and the South America and other Africa, because those regions are heavily suffered and affected too much by some negative GDP growth rate. So to that regard, we have the percentage share is increased in light of the world GDP, but population-wise maybe remains the same. So to that regard, the RCEP is one of the largest regional free trade agreement that would be readily compared with NAFTA, North America Free Trade Agreement, and the European Union. And so then the implication of the RCEP is quite important for the purpose of the stabilization of the economy and the financial system. Particularly, the globalization would take a different path than the previous one, because the previous globalization was conducted through the guidance and the leading from the United States. But actually, under the Trump administration, that role is tarnished very much, and the United States is not anymore a reliable leader. So that's why these RCEP and the agreement, because it has already 31 round of discussion, and actually they have discussed the details of the rules and the free trade agreement in several areas in the economic sectors. Therefore, this is very important, but I would like to recommend one more thing is we have to make progress in some kind of currency, not just rely on the international settlement currency such as the euro or dollar. So this region could have a large enough economy and independent of the international settlement currency. So we could, in this region, we could make and create another different currency that could be used for the purpose of the transaction within the trade, within regional trade. So that is very similar to the special drawing rights that is established within the IMF, but only special drawing rights could be established for the member countries within this RCEP.
A very thought-provoking idea there. Professor Sung Yang, what is Korea poised to gain from this regional trade pact?
Well, the RCEP, I mean, I just mentioned the numbers about the Asian countries, but if we include some more countries which are the members of RCEP, such as China, Japan, Korea, and New Zealand, Australia, and India, then their numbers in terms of the kind of impact are so very impressive. For example, in terms of the population, without India, the population takes up about 30%. But if you include the India, their proportion for the entire population goes up to almost 48%. Even though the proportion of their GDP is smaller than their the proportion for the population, because without India, their GDP takes only 29%, but with India, it takes up about 32%. But what is the more important thing for us is our dependency on this area, on RCEP, is very, very impressive. And we depend more than 50% in our entire export amount to this area. And besides, in this area, RCEP is taking up about 40% in the overall global supply chain. So if this area is destroyed, I mean, there are many, many countries or factories or manufacturing facilities may struggle because they cannot find the right partners to get the ingredients, parts, and components. For example, in Vietnam, about more than 45% of our investment in Vietnam is related to our manufacturing facilities, all right? And 1/3 of our export, because Vietnam is our third largest export partner country, and 1/3 of our export to Vietnam is involved with this kind of intermediary manufacturing. So Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, all these RCEP countries have become one of very critical the international trade partners.
I see. Professor Sung, back here in Korea then, quite a number of pundits here in the country and abroad are forecasting that Korea's economic growth rate for next year, 2021, will hit 3%.
Yeah.
What appears to be fueling this growth rate?
Yeah, some people argue that this is because of the previous economic growth rate was too low. That's why we have some base effect of the recovery of the economy. But however, these very impressive recovery of the growth rate is owing to some government very timely and effective control of the pandemic. But still, the obstacle lies in some other countries, such as the U.S. and the European countries and South American countries. They are still suffer from some outbreak and rather surge of the coronavirus patients and spread of the disease that could have a really severe impact on the supply because the labor workers simply cannot work. So that could work as some obstacle because our economy relies on very much substantial percentage of our GDP on the international trade. Therefore, export and maybe some hampered. So that's why the institutions make some reduction on the prospect of the economic growth rate. But that does not necessarily mean that we are going to into some double dip, or other countries may suffer from those double dip or but however, we could continue our efforts and or subsidy for the people who lost a job, and then we could make well and survive, not just to survive, but we could manage well, and then our economy could continue to grow much steadily and stably.
Right. Professor Yang, there is also belief that domestic consumption may be on track to recovery. Now, this comes because of the stronger than expected expenditure triggered by the Korea Sales Festa, which started off earlier this month. Do you agree with this observation?
Well, I should admit that there are some mixed feeling and emotions about these numbers, because the Korean government, with the 17 regional governments, have supported this event, so-called KOSEFE, Korea Sales Festa. This event lasts between November 1st through 15th for 2 weeks. And for the first week, from between November 1st and 7th, the credit card revenue has increased about 8.4% compared to last year. And particularly, the automobile sales have increased about 24% compared to last year. Because more than 3 times participants have joined this event. So there are about 1,633 vendors and companies have joined this event. But personally, I think this event may not such very critical to overturn the consumption spree, because I think this event has kind of tried to imitate like a Black Friday, in the U.S. But in the U.S., Black Friday has emerged one of very critical event to trigger the shopping spree, because this is almost the end of the every year. But in Korea, we have a shopping spree starting in the Thanksgiving, Chuseok, starting in mid-September or early October. So I should say that our shopping spree has pretty much spread it, since September. So we may not have such a very strong, compact energy to boost our shopping sprees. And if you take a look at the case of China, they have a huge event on the Singles Day starting in November the 11th. There are 4 number ones. Alibaba has been major player for this event. On this year, their sales on the single day have recorded more than almost $30 billion on the single day, with more than 800 million shoppers. So can you believe this one? Their sales record has increased more than 80% compared to last year. Well, in China, I should conclude that the China and U.S. may enjoy a lot from this event, shopping event. But in Korea, well, frankly speaking, I'm pretty much pessimistic.
I see. Professor Sung, owing to the lack of time, I'm going to have to rush towards the end. Last question. Now, you talked about variables to Korea's market stability, given the situation overseas. What contingency plans would you propose for Korea to ensure a sort of safety for the economy in the months ahead?
Yeah, because globally, other countries may suffer, and they are suffering from the pandemic, would be most likely to be extended in the future period. Therefore, our economy focus on the domestic demand and domestic consumption, and also in the October report about the labor workers' unemployment rate has been increased quite impressively. Therefore, we need to make some subsidy, provide a subsidy to the people who lost their job, not just because of the coronavirus, but this trend is already have started in the through the digitalization, which had started in as early as 2010 and after the financial and economic crisis. Therefore, we need to focus on how to provide and maintain the people's income level and then consumption level, and then further in 2 or 3 years after the economy recovers, then we could make a very sustainable and steady growth of the economy.
Right. As always, Professor Song, thank you very much for your thoughts. And Professor Yang, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, and on that note, we end today's coverage of COVID-19. Now, tomorrow we'll reiterate the importance of face masks in the absence of a vaccine or cure for COVID-19. In the meantime, take care and see you tomorrow.